Wing Women Weekend Nashville! Woohoo! Our next Wing Women Weekend takes place in Nashville, Tennessee, January 17th to 20th, 2025. Are you a woman in the LGBTQIA+ community who is looking to make friends, relax, unwind, and have fun? You have a burning desire to be a part of the queer community, but you're too shy to go out on your own. If so, then this event is for you. Join your Wing Women hosts, Anne-Marie Zanzal and Tonda McKay, for some socializing, Southern barbecue, dancing at the Lipstick Lounge, one of America's last remaining lesbian bars, and much more. This is the perfect opportunity to step out of your comfort zone and make new queer friends, aka your Wing Women. Spaces are limited. Don't delay. Reserve your spot today. For more information and to sign up, visit www.wingwomenweekend.com. That's wingwomenweekend.com. Hey queer friends, are you ready to be inspired? Welcome to Season 5 of Coming Out and Beyond, a podcast that shares stories from the LGBTQIA+ community. Here's your host, Anne-Marie Zanzal.
Welcome to Coming Out and Beyond. I am so excited to have a dear friend of mine on the show today. His name is Phillip Headrick, and he is not only a Nashville local like I am, but he is also somebody that came out of a very conservative Christian tradition. Maybe we can call it a cult. And he's going to share his wisdom with us today. So Phillip has been a physical therapist for over 25 years and is the co-host of the Nashville-based award-winning podcast, Two Bottled Steep. He recently started stand-up comedy and can be seen in the shows at Third Coast Comedy Club and Zany's Comedy Club here in Nashville. Phillip, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited. We finally did it. We had a couple kerfuffles.
We had a few. We're here. Yeah, I'm so glad to be here.
I'm excited. So, Phillip, how I start this podcast every single time is I say, tell me your story. So I would love to hear your story.
Sure. So I was born in Tennessee, in Arrington, Tennessee, which is about 40 minutes outside of Nashville. Grew up on a sheep farm with my two brothers and mom and dad. I was raised in a very traditional church. It was called The Truth. By all purposes, it meets the criteria for a cult, which I didn't realize when I was growing up. It just seemed like a very wonderful childhood for me. Went to college at UT Knoxville, went to PT school. And that's when I started realizing during those years that something was definitely different about me. I had all my friends were girls, but I had no attraction to them, and I definitely was attracted to the boys. So I thought I was this very cultural guy. I thought I just love everybody. That's just wonderful, right? And then I started hearing about gay, and I'm like, is that me? Is that something that and that's experimenting in college and realized that's exactly who I am. And then was essentially thrown out of the cult at that point, which was very, very devastating for me because that was really
I can only imagine.
It was a safe place for me. It was what I thought that this is the way I get to heaven. And I was told that was the only way to get to heaven. So to be thrown out of that was almost like saying, you don't have a chance. This is it.
I have some questions of curiosity. How do you define a cult? I'm just curious. I don't know. How do people define that?
Yeah, it's a group of people that generally is led by one person. It involves things like brainwashing, but all these terms seem so aggressive, I think, because the brainwashing wasn't necessarily, screamed at me or anything. It was just the way we lived. It was no television, don't celebrate holidays. Women don't wear makeup. They put their hair up and wear dresses, and men are the leaders of the home and make all the decisions. Like simple little things. But everybody believed that it was the only way to get to heaven. There were no room for error, whether it was divorce or sleeping around or lying. It was just, if that happened, you were done. There was no chance of going to heaven.
So there was no redemption. There was
redemption.
Nothing. No. You're just done out.
Unless you fell at the mercy of the church. and, a promise to, either be celibate or to make big changes. And you would dive into, holding the meetings in your home and that kind of stuff. So you could do it, but they made it so that it benefited the church,
Right. So let me ask you, I've had a lot of gay men on this podcast, and what I have come to realize that so many gay men really struggled with getting bullied when they were young. I'm curious, in this church atmosphere, did you get bullied or was it ignored?
Ignored.
Yeah.
Absolutely ignored. I don't ever remember a situation of being bullied. I remember one time being questioned, do I like boys? Like at a church convention. And I was so taken aback because I had no concept of what that was. I didn't have a TV. It didn't, it seemed like the rest of the world was existing. And I was in this very insular environment, which was fine. I was happy. I had a great family. And so I didn't seek out anything, but I also didn't know what gay meant or faggot or any of those things. And I remember hearing them, but I'm like, what is that? I don't
It just
hold
blows my
any
mind.
weight.
Well, yeah, and a cult controls what people view and consume.
Yeah.
So because you didn't have a TV, like you didn't even know what gay was, did you?
No.
You had no clue. Like,
No.
so I'm just so curious, when was the first time you were like, oh, well, I mean, there are like my mom. So my mom, if she was alive, she'd be 100. The first time she realized gay man existed is when she was stationed in San Francisco in the Navy during World War II. She was like 22 years old, and she
Yes.
realized, that's the first time she ever realized. She had no clue. So tell me, like, what was that moment like for you? First of all, how did you figure it out? And what was that moment like for you?
I kept finding myself attracted to men. I just couldn't figure out why I had that feeling. And when I got to college, I did undergrad at UT. College you're obviously exposed to a lot more people, and I kept finding myself um, partnering up, not sexually, but just friends with people who I guess were gay. I didn't know they were gay, but I was like,
Mm-hmm.
it seemed so free, and I was like, oh wow, that's
They're
cool.
your people.
Yeah.
You knew them. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I remember going to my first gay bar. It was called the Carousel in
Mm-hmm.
Knoxville. And I remember opening the door and looking in and being like, they're all here? Every one of them?
Everyone in the state of Tennessee was in there.
This is amazing. And so like most gay men do, you kind of jump just all in, right?
Yeah.
It's like when you're gay, it's gay. So it was like was going out a lot and meeting a lot of different people and starting to, mess around a little bit, but it just felt it felt comfortable to me. On the flip side of that was also every single time I would have an experience with a guy would be months of just praying and begging God to don't let this be the time that you send me to hell. Like I'm just trying to explore. There's all these reasonings so every time it would get shorter and shorter of when I was, staying sad and praying a lot. And then it got to be where I was like, this has got to be me. And so I had the preachers from the cult came to my house. This is several years later. And
How old were you?
I was probably 20, maybe 22.
So did you tell mom and dad what was okay? I have a question of curiosity. Most people from a cult do not go to a university like UT. How did that happen?
Yeah, my brother he kind of was a trailblazer. He's the first one. He went to live in Europe. He showed me that there was a possibility that the world was out there for me. I wouldn't have. I would have stayed at home and
if you had been a straight man, you'd probably still be in the cult.
Yeah, I'd be married, living, on my parents' farm, probably.
Yeah.
Kids.
Raising sheep.
Right. And secretly getting on Grinder. But yeah, so
your brother really he sounds like he was more questioning than you.
He's always been that way.
Yeah, some people are.
Yeah, and I love that about him. And he showed me a way to not to live, but that the options that I had.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a full ride to a college up in Indiana and turned it down because I wanted to go where he went because that was like a safety thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
I even wrote a letter to the dean to see if I could live off campus with him as my freshman year, which they allowed. So it was me kind of out of the nest, but still with people that I felt safe with.
Right, right.
And then I
So,
came out.
so you're telling your so here you are, you're exploring, you're figuring this all out. Did you tell mom and dad?
So I told mom and dad over the phone. They had I had gotten a credit card in college. You know how they used to set out in the college quad, and you could sign up for credit cards with
Yeah.
two
And
free
so
liter
you get in
Coke.
horrible debt. So
Yeah. So I get two Cokes out of it, and then $6,000 in debt. But I had used that some of that money to pay for counseling because I didn't know what to do and I didn't know what I was feeling. And then I didn't pay the credit card bill. So the bill goes to my dad, and they called me, and it was like a split second decision. They said, "Why do you have all these charges?" And I just broke down and I was like, I've got something I got to tell you. Um, and the conversation was much different than I expected. I expected them to hang the phone up and to, turn their back and all this stuff. And I remember Dad said, "Is there anything we can do to fix it?"
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was a genuine question for him. And he even
Mm-hmm.
said, "I'll give you the money to go to conversion therapy." I don't think he called it conversion therapy, but that was essentially what it
Yeah.
was.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, I don't need therapy to fix it. I just need therapy to like learn how to live with myself,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with how I am. And, it probably helped that I was away from home because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to, see their sorrow. I know it was hard on them. I know my mom and dad cried for months. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I remember the first time I came home, when I left, mom walked out with me to the car and she said, the thing that makes me feel the best right now is that you didn't change. I thought you were going to come home someone different. You came home the exact same way.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes me feel comfortable because we
Well,
didn't. I was like, what do you think I was going to show up in drag? Like,
well, they
I'm
probably
home.
I'm fabulous. well, well, your parents most likely had a idea in their head of what somebody was gay was like. They probably thought it, people who are more on the flamboyant side often have glass closets.
Hmm.
They can't hide it.
Yeah.
And so those are the representation people get, especially around high school, middle schools kind of thing, So your parents probably just thought you were going to come home like,
Yes. Come home
and
in
you,
sequins and,
yeah.
makeup on and all that. Um, but I think the biggest lesson I took from that coming out was it was probably been a year and a half or so. And I kind of gave my parents an ultimatum. I had a boyfriend at the time. And I remember sitting in the den and I'm like, if you don't let him come home with me for Christmas, then we're not coming. And I could just see the hurt on their face. Like, we're almost like we're trying here, we're doing
Yeah.
everything. And mom said to me, she said, "You have given us a very short window to figure this out. And you've had 20 something years to like process this. Just give us some time."
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want you to know I have a boyfriend and maybe you could come up and meet him there and not
Yes.
come to the house. And we do a slow rollout of the
Mm-hmm.
gayness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh,
But I also think I, I talk about that a lot because a lot of times for us, it's like been a lifetime thing. We don't know. We wrestle with it. Like one of the sayings in my later in life group is straight girls don't lie awake at night wondering if they're gay, which actually that theory has been tested and it is true.
yeah.
I had some, they just don't. And I mean, I thought everybody laid
Yeah, I did
everybody
too.
did.
Yes.
So, and I think that a lot of times people don't give their parents enough grace.
Yes.
And I'm curious, where did that grace come from?
I do credit religion as, I mean, my parents are wonderful, wonderful humans
I know I
who
just saw your pictures on Facebook with your dad going to Scotland. You guys were so cute.
it,
You were so cute.
it was the coolest experience just to see him in the world and just he's so curious. I love people that are curious,
Mm-hmm.
so curious. And, So when I talk about growing up in a cult, I think immediately people might think it's this awful situation because we all immediately go to those, stories on the news of horrible.
Yeah,
For me,
people
it
drinking the
wasn't.
Kool-Aid and stuff.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
For me, it was, I have a very good base of love and grace and forgiveness and prayer. I feel really close with God in that
Well,
sense. And so
oh,
I think that helped them.
mhm.
But they couldn't really balance the thou shalt not lay with a man. But right above that for them was, but he's our son. So we're
Which
gonna,
is phenomenal. You know that, because
yes,
for a lot of people that are in those types of religious um, uh, institutions, they choose, because now, like for the example, like the Southern Baptists now say that if you accept your queer child, this is what I heard, you will go to hell too. So your own salvation
yes,
is on the line. So a lot of times people, like, that's sort of new. That wasn't years ago. So my wife, I just want to affirm you, Philip, because when my wife um, she came out when she was like in her early 20s, and her first lover was her prayer partner from the Baptist student.
that tracks.
Yeah, that tracks, right? And in the morning after something happened between them, she said it was an outer body experience, because she was going across campus back to her room, and she realized that that everything had changed. Her life was not going to be how she thought it was going to be, and she thought she was going to shoot straight to hell.
Mm.
So when her partner and her would, fool around, then she would start crying. They'd pray, they'd get down. I mean, it was just, the thought, like, like from me as a mama, I'm like, oh, these poor kids,
Yes.
like, how that's like such suffering, around that. So I just want you to know that that's a real common occurrence for people, especially if they grow up in a religious background. They
Yeah.
really, and my wife was like, I'm going to shoot some straight to hell. I'm going to go have fun.
And that's exactly, it was almost cyclical. Like you
Mhm.
would go have fun, do something, and then like guilt-ridden, distraught for a few months, sometimes weeks, pray, pray, pray. And then I'm like, I remember asking one time, how many times you have to pray to God for something and no change. Like I prayed to feel this way for years,
Mhm.
years. I'm like, but like at some point there has to be, you either have to accept it or it's like, did I
Or maybe
miss
they,
something? Did he try to tell me I was straight and I missed it? Was I at a
or
gay bar when he told me or
well, or maybe the answer is that you have to accept yourself for who you are,
yes.
and
Yes.
God's not going to change it, and God doesn't care. I honestly do believe I know about the clobber passages. I'm sure if you're somebody who has deconstructed faith, there's like 8 clobber passages that they talk, and it's only about gay men, by the way. So the lesbians,
Yes. Y'all
fine.
are
Oh,
good.
we're
Yeah.
good. We're
You do
good.
whatever you want. You're good.
But it's really more about violence and
Yes.
subjugation. And so as you have done this, I'm losing my train of thought. What did you just say?
Well, my one of the things that helped me the most also is my younger brother. He went to seminary. He's a Baptist preacher, more on the liberal Baptist side. So for a few years he was preaching, and I remember talking to him about it, and just like, what if this? What if that? What if God does this? What if I go to hell? And he said, what kind of God do you think you worship? What does that say about your God? If your God is so judgmental about one part of your life that he would send you to hell for
Right,
that,
right.
it just hit me. And I'm like, I say that a lot to myself now. What does that say about the God that I worship? If I have a moment where I'm like, oh, he's going to be, but wait a minute. Like he's ready for me. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to try to be a good person. But the God that I believe in loves me for who I am, and I have no worries about being with men. Zero.
Yeah, that's what I was starting to say, is that I think, yes, there are the clobber passages in the Bible and everything like that, but I do think that God does not, God does not care.
No.
And if
Yeah.
you go back to the teachings of Jesus Christ, if it was such a big deal, Jesus would have mentioned it. Jesus never mentioned it
Ever. Yeah.
one time. He just didn't. And so, like, I think it was something that happened in that time period is, I mean, there's been queer people and gay people for
Yes.
forever. And they used to be seen as the shamans and the true spirit people and stuff like that. So, it's really only in the last, since 1945, when the NSV came out, RNSV, Revised New Standard Version, where they mistranslated it to homosexual, is when the change happened.
Yep.
So a quick question to you. So you're 22, you tell your parents did really well, actually, considering what you're talking about. They did pretty good.
Absolutely.
Your mom, and I also give your mom some credit for asking for space. And I also give you a tremendous amount of credit for giving her that space. Because sometimes I find that sometimes kids today are, and I may sound so old, sometimes people don't give they don't give people time to process things.
Yes.
So you had the three guys, the pastors of the church, show up at your house, or did they come to school?
No, they came I was renting an apartment. We sat there on the little couch in my living room, and he said to me, I told him, I don't even think I could say the word gay. I said, I think I have feelings for men more than I have feelings for women. That was like the closest thing I could get to. And so he said to me, didn't miss a beat. He said, God puts challenges in all of our lives. And he challenges me to not sleep with women because I'm a preacher. And your challenge is, because homosexuality is a sin, you can never act on that. You can never be in that situation if you want to be in this religion, which is the only way to get to heaven, is what I'm thinking, because I'm still in that cult mindset. And he said I could never take part in the ceremonies. I could never take the emblems. I just remember that feeling of like, that's it. My life I'm a hellion. I'm going to hell. I might as well go out and turn up. Like, what are the options now,
So you would have, if you had said, and I've had so many people that I've worked with that happened at 22, 23. And so they accepted celibacy. And then 20, 30 years later, they say, I can't do this anymore. And it's not fair.
Yeah.
It's just not fair. So if you had remained celibate as a gay man in that church, would you have been allowed to stay?
Yes, as long as I never acted on it. And some of that, obviously, I could sneak out, and do it and lie about it. But I was still really focused on, this was the only way. I felt almost like, I don't know the right word, like I was above a lot of people because I had been born into this wonderful religion.
Yeah, of course.
That I'm so holy, so pure and all that. Like, surely I can get this under control, because I've got a special task to tell people about the gospel and to share my story, but I couldn't do it being myself. I had to be, the married straight guy, or be a preacher. Most of the single guys in this cult end up being preachers, which the issue they're having today is, some sexual issues with the preachers. So I always think about that. What if I had listened to him and just dove in head first back into the cult? So
when did you realize that it wasn't the only way?
Probably 6 or 7 years later. I went through a really dark time, Anne-Marie. It was,
I'm sure.
Like, looking back, just, I don't know. I was not a good person, doing drugs. I was drinking a lot, going out. And that made me happy, that like drug happy, where you're like, everything's great. Dang.
Yeah.
But then on Sunday, I couldn't go to meeting. We called it meeting instead of church. I couldn't go to meeting, and I didn't belong to a church. So Sunday was just awful, because it was like, this is the Lord's day and I'm recovering with a hangover, and I'm doing nothing. And I started trying to find churches, and I was living in DC at the time, and I was trying to find a church. And so I'd type, I'd be like, where's a gay church? How do you go to a gay church? And then I'd go and I'd be like, no, this is too gay. I can't do that. And then I'd go to like a Catholic church, and I'm like, no, I was brought up to believe that Catholics don't go to heaven. Only, these type of people do.
Catholics go to hell,
Yeah. Yeah. And I went to a non-denominational church, And it was just like a feeling. The pastor was talking. It was a very good message just about inclusivity and the way we should love on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
He made a comment essentially like, God doesn't see you for all the negatives that you see in yourself. God
Mm-hmm.
sees you as a whole person who is worthy of love, who's worthy of being in his protection. And
Mm-hmm.
I just lost it. I was like, I'd never heard that before. No one's ever told me that that was possible. Is God really this loving that he would allow me to just be myself?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it clicked, and I was like, I've I feel good about being gay and being a Christian, and both of those going to church. That was a big thing for me, is I wanted to be able to go to church and feel comfortable and not judged. But the judgment was coming from inside.
Yeah,
No one's
inside.
ever, no one ever said anything negative to me at church. It was just the feeling like I know they know I'm gay. I know they're looking at me. I don't know when to stand up. I don't know the songs. I don't know this.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How did your parents, are they still part of the
Mhm.
religion? They are. And
Mhm.
how do they reconcile that? And how does the religion treat them because of you?
Um,
Do they give them a hard time?
No, but I think it does help. My mother and father are very well known within that religion. They're
Mm-hmm.
wonderful humans and have done so much for so many people, and dad's probably given money, dad's well off. So I'm sure. So I say that to say that they didn't say anything, but I think it's because of the status that my dad held. Like
Okay.
they don't want to mess up where the money's coming from or where
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so I never
Mm-hmm.
heard it if it was the case. Um, they are still a part of it, but are not in it 100%.
Mm-hmm.
They know. These
Yeah.
last few years have been very telling with the religion. But imagine a couple that has devoted their entire life to what they saw as a wonderful, and it is still wonderful humans that are in this cult. It's just the structure of it that's off. Um, I can't imagine living my whole life and then in my 70s realizing that that's not gonna, this is not the way.
Yeah.
So they're in that right now. They're in
Uh,
that mess,
they're in the mess of deconstruction.
the very beginning of it, and it's gut wrenching to watch
Oh,
because
I can imagine how hard that must be for them.
it's
You
really
know,
tough. But
yeah.
and I feel they gave me space and allowed me to be who I am. Like I'm trying to find ways to like show them that no matter what you're going through, please keep talking to me about this. If you want to go try other churches, we can do that. If you just want to have Bible study at home because that's what their comfort level is, we can
Mm-hmm.
do that. But to know that there are other things out there, other places you can go and worship and feel truly loved and valued and still get into heaven, you know.
Mm-hmm. 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 That existential dread really has a hold on people.
Mhm.
It's like, it's really interesting to me because I've never, as somebody who was pretty religious, as a minister and everything like that, I never really thought of my religion as a golden ticket to heaven.
Mhm.
My religion, the religion that like I've been Catholic, evangelical, and UCC, which is pretty progressive. And to me, it was more about how I was supposed to treat other people
Mhm.
and how I was supposed to show compassion for all humans. Um, like occasionally, I'm just going to be really honest. Occasionally, on some of my worst days, I may think, could it be possible that I could go to hell for like
Mhm.
loving my wife and
Mhm.
living with her? But then it feeling goes away. But it's it's pretty deep in there, and like for example, the first time I slept with a woman, which really stunned me because like intellectually I didn't think this at all.
Mhm.
But the first time, like for a fleeting second through my brain went, is this sinful?
Mhm.
And I
Yes.
was like, oh my God, like I was stunned. I'm a grown ass woman,
Yeah.
and I was like really stunned that I felt that. And then as time went on, I began to deconstruct all those feelings. But it sounds like to me, Philip, and it seems like it's been a lifetime of you sort of deconstructing about
Yeah.
what all this meant. And also now being seeing your parents going through this process now because of some of the bad things that happened in the cult. And so that's a lot of work.
It is. I had breakfast with Dad this past weekend, and we talk about like the fringes right now. Like I know we'll eventually be able to get deep into it, but like the conversations are things like how are things going in the church, that kind of stuff. And I asked him, I said, you know, what with all that's going on in the church that you go to, how do you feel, how do you worship and not be able to do it the way that, or know that you shouldn't do it the way that the cult wants you to? And he said, Philip, my new goal and my only goal in life is to follow Jesus. You don't have to be, you could be on an island and follow Jesus. You could be anywhere in the world. If you're following Jesus, that's what we're supposed to do. Show his
Mm-hmm.
compassion, show his love, show his grace. And so I think that's what they're focusing on. And I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed their judgment has softened.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying things like, everybody deserves love. Never heard that before. I mean, they loved us, but
Mm-hmm.
religious people are a little judgy. Look at
Yeah.
her. What is she wearing?
She
And
has eyeliner on.
oh, pink
Sinful,
hair in
sinful woman.
Walmart. What is she doing? So, but I just tell their language is changing too, and it's so I love it. It's just so cool to see it. I hate that they're going through it, but I think this is the thing that's going to really even make us closer as a family unit. We're close, but religion was always the sticking point because all
Mm-hmm.
three of their sons left the
Mm-hmm.
cult, and
Mm-hmm.
they're the only ones in it. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
excited to see where this is going, but also just hurt that they have to go through it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What lessons did you learn from coming out?
I learned the importance of being honest with yourself. I made excuses for everything just to make me feel better. It was all
Mm-hmm.
about very selfishly, like, this is okay, this is fine, I can do it. It's just a little bit, just being completely honest with myself. I learned self-love, which I
Mm-hmm.
don't think I ever had.
Mm-hmm.
We give, but you don't spend a lot of time loving yourself and like finding time to just love myself, which sounds
Mm-hmm.
cheesy, but it really is helpful for, find that thing that you can do to show yourself love.
Mm-hmm.
And then the importance of time, and not
Mm-hmm.
just coming out, but with everything. Like mom's comment about give us time, it has helped me in so many situations.
Mm-hmm.
Not always dramatic things, but you give somebody information, and sometimes you got to give them an hour, a day, a week. Take it. And when you're ready
Mm-hmm.
to talk about it, let's talk about it then. And that conversation's a lot easier than if you're forcing but what do you think? Why can't you make a decision? Why,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
those
Mm-hmm.
things I think have helped me just to be a better human, really.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that there's this, parents are supposed to have unconditional love for their children, but parents are also human beings and they also need to process things sometimes. And I don't know what the statistics are, but I think most parents generally come around to love.
Mhm.
There are, I mean, they may not do it perfectly. You may have to distance yourself if it's painful. Um, but I think most parents try to do the best. There's always the outliers, right? But most
Yeah.
parents try to do the best they can with their kids. What would you tell somebody if they were coming out? What advice would you give?
Um, I see a lot of younger people now that come out very dramatically, right? It's this,
Yeah.
I'm out. I think read the room, meaning know your family.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got a super conservative family that says hateful things about the LGBTQ community, that may not be the safest, it may not be safe to come out. So read the room, know what you're getting into, be patient with the people you tell. And
Mm-hmm.
do not be offended or upset with like a casual comment or a cavalier comment that's said, because oftentimes they don't mean that. It's just they're lashing out and hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Be patient with people, and be consistent. Like, if you're going to be gay, be gay. Just like stick with that. I don't mean like you can't, change and be like, oh, actually I'm bi. But I mean, stick with when you presenting this to somebody, I'm gay, this is who I am, and stick with that. Like people need to see that you are who you are, and this is gay Phillip. He's acts the same no matter what. I think that's a challenge for a lot of people because there's so many gender variances now and so many different
Oh, it's hard.
ways to
And
present.
well, yeah. And also too, like even with my clients, everybody they try on every letter of the alphabet before
Yeah.
they finally, like when I start working with people, it is, I think I might not be straight.
Yeah.
That's how that's all we do.
Yeah.
I don't worry about the various labels for people. People will decide on that. But I do think that sometimes I think that people like, especially when you're young, I think that we can be naive sometimes. And I always really, I think you're giving the same advice I would give. Choose who you tell.
Yes.
Make sure that like, especially like the first couple of people, make sure it's somebody you know is going to be supportive or even happy for you.
Yes.
Don't tell grandma if she is a Trumper and is
Yeah. Don't do it at Thanksgiving.
don't do it at Thanksgiving. Don't do it at Christmas.
No. A non-holiday, simple get together,
Yeah.
is the safest
And also
time.
too, I want another piece of advice I would add on to that is that don't wait until you have a partner to tell your family or a
Yes.
girlfriend or a boyfriend or somebody who is in the queer community, because then with parents, the families that are really, really conservative, they will always blame that person for turning you and making you gay.
Yep.
And so I feel like it's so funny because I see this in the pages and they're like, oh, I'm not going to tell my parents I'm gay because, I don't even have a partner yet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, go tell your parents now.
Yes, right.
So when you bring that girlfriend, boyfriend, or other person, non-binary person home, they will say, oh, they're now introducing me to their partner, their boyfriend or their significant other. And it doesn't become convoluted with that person because that's
Yes.
a huge burden to put on your significant other.
Yes.
It really is. So that's like what I would add.
I think that's exactly what needs to happen. And also, like we talked about earlier, kind of the slow roll of your life. You do not have to tell people every single thing. I'm gay, I sleep with men, I like this, I go to drag shows, I drink a lot, like don't say it out of
Wow.
like just give them a little bit. I'm gay.
Yeah.
And I'm working on that and I'm proud of myself, just and show that you love you. I think if you show that you are confident in your decision, not that it's decision, but confident in your decision to tell them, I think that's the best way to do it. Because if you present in I've got something I'm going to tell you, and I think you're not going to like it, and it's going to be bad, and I don't like, no, set it up for positive.
Right. Set
I'm
it
really
up for
excited to
positive.
tell you all this.
And actually, I like in my own coming out, I had the experience of coming out to my children. And yeah. And so for them, it was like, Mom, are you happy? That was their concern for me is like, because it brought a lot of turmoil to our family because I divorced their dad and everything like that. And so they were really, really concerned about whether I was happy. And so I think that's true for people that love you. They want to see you happy. Now, like my kids didn't understand that I was going through this tremendous grieving process at the time because my whole entire life changed and I lost a marriage of 27 years. My ex-husband's not a bad guy. We had a very good relationship. But I was grieving all the loss of that. So they saw me sad and happy, but they kept on worrying about, are you happy that you're doing this? And I think that people that love you really do worry, like, yes. Are you happy? Just be happy and I'm okay.
Yes.
So, and actually, as we are doing this, I don't know if you hear the dinging in the background, but my wife and 4 kids are texting each other about the election tomorrow.
Oh, yes. Oh, gosh.
So they're all on the same side, but they're all texting each other. And they're like, one of my children is like, I am just pretending none of this is happening.
Look, I even bought tickets to go see a show at TPAC tomorrow night because
I will see you there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm going to Shucked.
Yes.
Yes, see you there.
I can't. Yes, make sure. I want to see you.
Okay. Well, we'll
Picture.
get together.
But just so I didn't have to sit at home. I'm like, I can't sit at home and watch the news.
I'm not going to do that.
No.
So what's really excited for me to talk about now, and I really love all the advice you gave, is that you're doing something a little brave. You are starting to do stand-up comedy. And
Yes.
so later in life, woohoo!
Yes.
So, okay, you're funny. You're naturally funny. So have you always wanted to do stand-up?
I've always wanted to do something in comedy. And it was the one thing that terrified me more than anything. And I would get the idea and I'd try to do a little bit with it. And then it was just like, I can't do it. I can't do it. Podcasting was easier because you didn't have to see me. I'm in my studio. It's controlled. And then I realized that I was enjoying the comedy part, like adding comedy to the podcast and getting reactions to it. I'm like, okay, maybe I can do this. So I took classes at Third Coast, about 6 months of classes, and it was amazing. And the graduation at each of those classes is performing. So I started performing about a year ago, and I've probably done 10 or 11 shows this past year. It's the coolest experience. I can't even explain how wonderful it feels to stand on stage and for everybody to kind of be leaned in, just like, what's he gonna say? It's almost power. I don't mean I'm a power hungry person, but like taking people on a journey of jokes. It's just, I leave the stage and I feel like I'm just amped. I'm like, let's go.
I understand that. As somebody who preached, I get that.
Yes. Yeah.
I get that. I've had that experience. And then I've also gotten off the pulpit and felt like shit. But
yeah. I've done that a few times too at open mic.
But when you deliver something that touches people, it is the coolest feeling in the world. Yes. It is like the highest high. Yes. And that was one of, with preaching that happened several times. And it was so I understand, are you a storyteller comic? And then you tell a story. Like, I love Fortune Feimster. She's one of my favorite comedians. She's a storyteller comic. Yes. Yeah.
I do. Every year at Thanksgiving, Christmas with family dinners, Mom was always, Philip, tell the story about such and such. And I love it because I can exaggerate and draw it out. And I feel like I've honed my storytelling skills over the last 45 years. But yeah, I try to do a lot of like self-deprecating humor. I don't like to make fun of others in public. No. But yeah, I try to tell stories, and I'm 49 years old. I've lived. I've got
you've got plenty of stories.
Lots of stories to but the interesting thing that I wasn't prepared for is it made me more comfortable with being made fun of. And I don't mean in a bad way, but just like, I'm the kind of guy, like, friends, you rib each other and you give them a hard time. I can get them. Like, I've got these great one-liners, but if they hit back, there was always this like, wait a minute, Now it's like, I want to be roasted. I want somebody to tell me, yeah, come on, let's go. Make fun of me. It's just a wonderful feeling to be so comfortable that whatever people say to me or make fun of me about anything now, I'm just like, okay, that's cool. Whatever.
So it sounds like with this experience of like learning how to do this is that you've let go of perfectionism.
That's very well put. That's exactly. Because I wouldn't go up on stage until like every joke was perfect. And they're like, Philip, it's an open mic. There's 7 people here. Like, just get up there and do it. I'm like, no, I have to be perfect.
Yeah, you have to. Well, that comes from religion.
Yes.
That does. It's so funny. Years ago, when I was a young mother, the way I kept my sanity was go to aerobics classes. Like I was like, I would go, I had the best body of my life when I was a young mommy. And so I would go to aerobics classes and they needed a teacher. And I'm like, oh, I can't do that. I was like, I couldn't, like, the thought, like, how am I I was so nervous that I couldn't do that. And I never did it. And so the other day I go to the Y in East Nashville and they needed a water aerobics instructor. And I'm like, I'll do it.
Yes.
I'll do it. I mean, I've gone to 5,000 water aerobic classes.
Yeah.
Like, I can do this with a group of people for 40 and we'll have fun. And I mean, like, I'm so much more comfortable with being vulnerable in front of people. And I think people need to see that, because
Yes.
when we show up and be vulnerable and you make a mistake or you tell a joke and you're like, oh shit, I told it wrong or something like that. And sometimes when we acknowledge our vulnerability, people see that and they're like, oh, it's okay that I don't have all my shit together, because
Yes.
Phillip sure doesn't.
Yes. And that's the kind of feedback I get is,
I can't wait to come to see you. I
I'll
really
let you, I'll let you
let
know.
me know the next time.
I will. I countless times people come up and say, you're funny, but the thing that I remember is, you talked about stuff that could potentially be really sad and really, awful about, what you went through and stuff like that. But you told it in such a way that it made it made it funny, and now I feel comfortable. I want to share my story, like that kind of stuff, where people want to open up, and that's what I love about it, is being able to take something that's challenging for me, and how do you make that funny without being disrespectful, without being hurtful? How can we make religion funny or politics funny? And I think so many comedians go for the really mean digging jokes, and sometimes that's funny. I mean, comedy's about, calling out all sorts of stuff, but I'm just super happy to be doing it. It's the only time I get stage fright. But I mean, the show at Zany's, Anne-Marie, when I got on stage, blank, I could not remember my
I'm
opening joke.
sure.
And I just stood there. I stood there and I was like, "What's up, Zany's? Zany's?" They're like, "We know we're at Zany's. Let's go."
Did it come to you? Like,
It
finally?
came to me. It just pops in my head, and then it starts. And I skipped a joke, and then I was present enough to be able to go back to it and do it. So I left the stage just being like, I think I've got this now. Like, I've had stage fright, I've messed up, I've been heckled, I've been, all those things have happened. I'm a stand-up comedian
Well,
now.
yeah. And you've like, you got heckled and you dealt with it and life goes
Yeah.
on. Yeah. I remember when I was first preaching, I really made it hard for myself. I would preach without a text. Like, now I'm like, why did I do that?
Yeah,
But
why?
I remember being like, I'm sure you did this. Like, I'd be in my car and I went to Yale, New Haven. I went to Yale for my divinity school, and I would drive an hour back and forth. And at the time I was serving a church. And so I would like practice my preaching the entire way there and then the entire way back, because I had to remember it. Did you do all that work with your stand-up? Like, how many times did you do it? Like 8,000 times?
Anne-Marie, I wish you could be in my car on the way to work every morning. As soon as I pull out of the garage, I'm like, okay, what's up, Zanies? Right. And there's all these rules that they taught me in school, like don't do your set for 24 hours before your show, because it just makes you nervous. But no, I'm the one that's like the whole day before, on the way to the theater, I'm pacing back. All the other comics are like sitting on the couch talking about childhood and having fun. I'm pacing and I'm like, okay, what's the joke after the they're like, relax. I'm like, I will relax when it's over.
Yeah. Well, you know what? You're new. So you
Yeah.
might get to the point where you're like sitting on the couch with them and having fun. And when you're new, it's something you have to, well, yeah. And also it's the church boy in you, you have to have everything right in the row and stuff like you. I mean, you can take the boy out of the church, but you can't take the church out of the boy.
It's true.
Yeah.
And my biggest fear right before I walked out on stage was, what if somebody from the church is in the audience? And it was like, wait a minute, why are you worried
First of all,
about
they're never going to be there.
No, I mean, there's so many reasons why it would never happen, but that's still with me. It's like, I hope I don't say something that hurts somebody, religiously in the cult. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? You're making fun of this religion, but it's nothing bad against them. It's just how crazy it was for me. Like,
right.
But it still
And
has
also
mind control.
well, they don't watch TV, so they're not going to do this, honey. That's just not going to happen. I'm not
saying it was a smart thought. It was just a thought. So
did you have a coming out song?
So, share, do you believe in love? And it's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily because of the words. Like, I remember getting that CD and driving in my Saturn, my little maroon Saturn car with the sunroof opened, and I'm just going around Knoxville. Do you believe in life after life? And when we would come into the clubs, we all had a dance for it. And it was just, every time I hear it now, I go right back to my apartment in Knoxville and it's all happy. There's no negative with that song. It's just a wonderful, wonderful song for me.
So, how about a book or a movie that really changed your life? What would that be?
The best book I think I've ever read, and I recommend it to everybody, is Malcolm Gladwell's Talking to Strangers.
Which is
Uh,
about.
so it is essentially teaching that with all the different types of people we meet, we make immediate judgments based on very little information. And it goes into historical situations that were misconstrued or because they didn't understand the person. And so it really is take the time to understand somebody before you judge their reaction to anything. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I try to read it once a year, and every time I'm just like, I got to do better at this. I got to do better at this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the power of listening and the power of not judging too soon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people need to read that book.
Uh, I
You
give it to
may.
people for Christmas, and they're like, "What is this?" I'm like, You really need to read this."
How would you describe your life today?
I love my life right now.
Mm-hmm.
Love my physical therapy. My clinics are doing great. I have a wonderful staff. My family is better than ever. I have wonderful friends. I'm single at 49. I'd say that's the only thing that makes me slightly sad because it's not exactly where I thought I would be, but 99% of me is fabulous. 1%
Mm-hmm.
of me is like, sure love somebody, but we'll see. Maybe it won't happen.
Well, so just so you know, my 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 wife's cousin is a good old Methodist boy. He sings in his church choir still. He lives in West Hollywood. And I'm like, I am sending him this interview.
Do it. I
He's
tell
very good.
everybody.
He's actually an agent for kids in Hollywood. He
Oh,
does
really?
he's a musical theater person that, he used to be in Chippendales.
Go ahead and send this
I
immediately.
will. I will. He's really, but what I love about him is he's thinking about going to seminary now. So,
Yeah,
and I think you guys would get along. So I'm going to send that to him and
do
I'm
it.
going to say, I have a friend for you. I have so many friends for him.
Well, that's the only way to meet. I mean, there's plenty of dating apps and all that, but it's a nightmare out here in terms of dating. Um,
Well, I think that what I have to, I, yeah, it seems like I've started a dating thing with my business called
mhm,
Lavender Dating, and we're gonna be, well, where we're moving towards is right now it's just coaching and support, but what we really want to do is there's a hunger out there for people who are looking for partners,
mm,
and they don't. It's not, it's they're monogamous. They don't want to be in a polyamorous relationship, or I know gay men relationships sometimes have
yeah,
like things like that, but they're monogamous. They want their main partner, and they want to find somebody to spend their life with. And so that's what the app is. It's not a hookup app. It's not. So that's what we're hoping to create with this for
love that.
lesbian women,
Yeah.
because it's, and also too, we can talk about the other stuff later. So how can people find you, Phillip?
So I on Instagram, it's Phillip Headrick, two
Mm-hmm.
L's, at
Mm-hmm.
gmail.com, or Phillip Headrick is the Instagram, and then my email is philiphedrick@gmail.com. And then I have a podcast at Two Bottles Deep. That's on Instagram as well. There's 142 episodes of all sorts of wonderful conversations, including two with Miss Anne-Marie here, who
Yes.
taught us so much,
Mm-hmm.
including the phrase, and I know Wes and I always talk about this, is letting people in, not coming out to
Coming
people.
out. Right. Yeah.
And I use that all the time and give you credit for that because
Ah,
one of those moments like, oh, wow.
I know Wes told me that when he came on the podcast. He was
Yeah, it's
like, yeah, he said the exact same thing when I said that to you guys. He goes, it just like turned my world upside
like
down.
a light bulb.
Yeah,
Like,
it
why didn't
is.
nobody
It's
tell me
actually,
this?
Yeah, it is about letting people in. But we call it coming out because it's shorthand and everybody understands it. But really, it's about letting people in and letting people know who you are authentically, and I notice when people come out, it's always family and then friends, and then it's like the whole world.
Yes. Yes.
And then by the time you get to the whole world, you could care less.
Right. Who cares what they say?
Yeah, I don't care.
Yeah.
All right, Phillip, it was wonderful to have you on the show. Good luck with your comedy. I really, I think you're very, very funny. So can't wait to come and see one of your shows. So good luck with everything. Thank you so much for coming on today. And thank you. I really appreciate about you is that through all of this, you have been able to maintain a belief and a faith, and sort of taken away let go of the bad and have kept the good part of what you grew up with and what you know. Yeah. So I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate your time. I love you and all the wonderful things you're doing. So thank you so much for allowing me to do this.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to Coming Out and Beyond, LGBTQIA plus stories with Anne-Marie Zanzal. New episodes of the Coming Out and Beyond podcast drop every other Friday. You can tune in at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and at annemariezanzal.com. Be sure to hit subscribe when tuning in so you never miss an episode. And for more resources, articles, videos, and a free downloadable guide for coming out later in life, visit annemariezanzal.com.